Last month, one of our satellites detected a signal that sounded like screaming. A little girl screaming in cold blood, at least something that sounded like one. I remember the moment that Jared turned on the speakers installed around the room, and the sound came flooding through. The filter squeaked with static from the volume of the signal. Most of us covered our ears. It almost blew out our hearing. I held my hands to my temples and looked down at my coffee cup. The plaster was breaking and splintering with spiderweb cracks. Coffee was spilling. Everyone else, though, I could hear their screaming from around me. Uma prayed to God for Jared to turn the speakers off. No reply from Jared. Another member of our team, an intern named Francis, was wailing like a banshee. Speakers were blowing up from the signal. Sparks fluttered at the edge of my vision. Complete chaos. Something warm touched my hands, and I knew right away that it was blood. For some reason, I didn't panic. I just stood there with my hands over my ears and an overwhelming urge to not move. The warmth seemed more comforting than terrifying. I felt sleepy. The signal itself was changing into something else. I get the worst headache when I try to remember anything about that something else, but I know that it was a voice. The voice was singing. It was lulling me to sleep. I closed my eyes just for a second. I saw shapes in the dark underbellies of my eyelids, swirling, twirling shapes of color swimming around the inside of my head. Recognizable forms, fish of all shapes and sizes and kinds, squids tickling worlds with tentacles writhing, whales that graced the outlines of immense gas planets and stars and pods. I could see them all, cosmic fish. A wave of serenity came over me, all-encompassing, universal in its intensity. The same sense of calm I used to feel when I looked up at the model fish that rotated above my crib as a young child. I wanted to stay. I wanted to drown in it. Thank God that I didn't, though, because during those few seconds, the audio equipment blew out all at once, and the sounds were cut off. The signal and the voice. I came back and everyone was safe aside from headaches and nosebleeds and being passed out. Jared had died, though. He was slumped over in his chair with blood dripping out from his eyes and his ears and his mouth. The others have concluded that the signal had caused the seizure, but I know that they don't believe themselves. I just can't explain what or how this happened. I've dreamed about it. The strange numbing sensation that had flooded my thoughts when the signal was broadcasted across the facility, and the screams from my fellow SETI researchers. I've gone over the implications again and again in my head, but I still can't understand why the signal had such an effect on us. Or why I can hear distant singing whenever I stare up at the sky. Or why I can see constellations move. I watched her sleep as I cradled the gun, pausing only to wipe the silent tears rolling down my cheek. We had made a pact last night, a deeper pact than even our wedding vows had been many years ago. I was about to betray that pact. I stared out at the desolate landscape. Nothing to see for miles and miles apart from the 6 mounds marking the shallow graves of our crew and the remains of our spacecraft. They were the lucky ones. When our spacecraft malfunctioned during entry into the atmosphere, only I and Lucinda survived. It wasn't meant to be like this. We were here to mine ice for the nutrients our home planet needed from it. Well, the mining would be done by the drilling crew, but we first had to build the support structures to house the drills that would arrive in a couple of days. Now, we waited for the crew to arrive, and with them, the extra oxygen tanks we required. Ours had exploded upon impact, and all that was left were the ones that were on our backs, which would run out today, and one that somehow survived the landing. It wasn't enough for us both, but one of us could survive until the drilling crew arrived. We had both offered to give our lives for the other, but neither could accept the offer. In the end, we agreed we would die together. It was a surprisingly short discussion when you consider the gravity of the situation. I hadn't slept. Lucinda seemed to have found peace in our pact and was sleeping deeply. During the night, I had realized that our decision, whilst being the only reasonable one we could come to together, was ridiculous. There was no need for both of us to die. But if I made the decision on my own, then one of us could live. As I loaded the gun, I wondered if it would hurt or if death would be instantaneous. I raised the gun, took one last look at my sleeping wife, and pulled the trigger. As I crawled towards the spare oxygen tank, I wept. It wasn't her fault that nobody seemed to listen to her. She figured it came with whatever she had. She couldn't see into the future. No, what she saw felt more like memories, or some form of deja vu. Visions of events would enter her mind, and then they would always, inevitably, happen. Sometimes it was something as simple as someone dropping or breaking a glass, but other times edged towards car crash levels of devastation. When she finally realized the connection between her thoughts and her reality at a few years old, she tried to warn people, but they always dismissed it as a child's imagination. As she got older, she adapted a more subtle and vague approach to the topics, but she was always brushed off. All she could do was watch helplessly as the events unfolded in front of her once again. But last week was different. Last week, what she saw felt as simple as the memory of the first day of kindergarten. It was nowhere close to that simple. This time, she wouldn't go ignored. She couldn't. They had to listen. She posted on the internet, contacted journalists and scientists, even wrote to those crazy religious people that are spouting one crackpot theory after another. No matter how many posts she wrote, letters she sent, or meetings she had, no one paid attention to what she said. A week was longer than any amount of time that had ever passed between experiencing the vision and it becoming reality. She almost began to expect that it might never happen. Every night that she looked up looked the same as the night before. When she set up her blanket on top of the hill near her house, she didn't know what to expect. Maybe nothing. As she counted the stars above, a cold wind blew around her, pushing the grass to her skin and hair to her eyes. Wait, there. What was that? No, it couldn't be. There it was again. A small ripple in the sky above, like someone was airing out a blanket made of darkness. The waves continued one after another down the middle of the sky, sliding stars and swinging them back to their rightful place again, and again, and again. She watched, once again, as the fabric of the universe ripped in two.